Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Ben, and let me tell you, things have gotten pretty wild in my life recently. I'm 34, just an average warehouse manager living in Columbus. My life wasn't anything special, but it was steady. I had a solid job, a nice house, and was married to Kathy. We'd been together for 5 years and married for 3, and I thought things were going pretty well. Sure, we weren't the over-the-top, lovey-dovey couple you see on TV, but we made it work. Bills got paid. We had our date nights, and the occasional argument was just part of the normal marriage stuff. At least, that's what I thought. Then about 6 months ago, Kathy decided to dive into a big fitness journey. It came out of nowhere, but I was all for it. She joined this fancy gym downtown that looked more like a spa than a workout place, got herself a personal trainer named Roger, and started obsessing over meal prepping, macros, and detox plans. I didn't mind at first. In fact, I encouraged it. Everyone deserves to feel good about themselves, right? Plus, I figured it was just a phase, like her brief obsession with knitting, or that time she got into tarot cards. At first, I even helped out. I took on more of the chores, doing dishes, laundry, running errands, so she'd have more time to focus on her workouts. I thought it was a nice way to show her I cared. But as time went on, things started to change, and not for the better. The more weight Kathy lost, the bigger her ego became. She was obsessed with her reflection, spending hours in front of the mirror adjusting her gym outfits or taking the perfect progress photos for Instagram. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about having an audience. I remember one Friday night, I suggested we watch a movie together. I thought we could relax like we used to, but she scoffed at me, saying, "Ben, I don't have time to sit around. I have goals to crush." Goals? What goals? We weren't talking about running a marathon or climbing a mountain. She was just lifting weights and drinking green sludge. But whatever, I shrugged it off. Maybe I was the unreasonable one. But then came the morning everything changed. It started like any other. Me half asleep, sipping my coffee before work, and Kathy downing her usual kale and spinach smoothie. She was in her workout gear, scrolling through her phone like her life depended on it. Out of nowhere, she said, "I deserve more in life." I looked up, still groggy, and muttered, "Huh? More of what?" She put her smoothie down and stared at me with a serious look. "This marriage is holding me back, Ben. I'm filing for divorce." At first, I thought she was joking and even laughed, thinking she was messing with me. But when I saw the look on her face, stone cold, no hint of a smile, I realized she wasn't. "I've outgrown this," she said, like I was some outdated piece of furniture she was ready to throw away. "You wouldn't understand." I sat there, completely blindsided. The woman I'd spent years of my life with just dropped this bomb on me like it was nothing. I tried to process her words, but all I could feel was a mix of shock and anger bubbling up inside me. "What do you mean, you've outgrown this?" "Outgrown what?" I asked. She sighed, like I was a child asking too many questions. "Ben, I've been working on myself, trying to be the best version of me. And frankly, this life doesn't match my potential anymore. I want more than this house, this routine, this you." Her words hit me hard. She didn't even try to soften them. In her eyes, I was part of the problem. The life we'd built together wasn't good enough for her anymore. Without another word, she grabbed her gym bag and walked out the door, leaving me there, stunned, without even a goodbye. I sat there, staring at the half-finished glass of green sludge she'd left behind, trying to make sense of what had just happened. That day at work felt like a blur. I went through the motions, but my mind was stuck on Kathy. Was this real? Was she really leaving me? We'd had our disagreements before, sure, but divorce? It felt so sudden, so deliberate. The way she said it, like she'd rehearsed this speech for weeks, made it clear she'd already made up her mind. Over the next few days, the cracks in our marriage became impossible to ignore. She barely spoke to me unless it was about dividing up the house or setting up mediation. She started staying out late, claiming she was at the gym or hanging out with friends. Her phone was always in her hand, and her Instagram was flooded with selfies and posts like "New chapter, who this?" and "Living my best life." Every post felt like a slap in the face, a reminder that she'd already mentally moved on, even though the divorce papers hadn't been signed yet. One night, while strolling through my own social media, I noticed she deleted every picture of us. Wedding photos, anniversary posts, gone. It was like she'd scrubbed me out of her life completely. Meanwhile, her new posts were getting tons of likes and comments, with people praising her. "You're glowing." Such an inspiration. It made me sick. None of these people knew the real Kathy or what she was putting me through. Another night, while I was getting ready for work, I overheard her talking on the phone in the kitchen. She was using that fake, sugary voice she'd put on when she wanted something. "Yeah, I just feel so free now," she said. "I'm finally doing what makes me happy." She paused, then giggled. He doesn't even get it. He's stuck in the past. That's when it hit me. Kathy wasn't just leaving me. She was reinventing herself, and I was the anchor she was cutting loose. But here's the thing. I'm not the type of guy to just roll over and let someone walk all over me. She thought she could steamroll me and walk away with everything, but she was in for a rude awakening. This was just the beginning. If Kathy wanted a fight, she was going to get one. But wait, it gets worse. One afternoon, I'm having lunch at a cafe near work, minding my own business and scrolling through my phone when I overhear two guys at the next table. They're talking about some fitness babe they found online. I didn't think much of it until one of them said her name, Kathy. My stomach sank. They were laughing, talking about how she had some premium content she was promoting. At first I thought, no way, not Kathy. But then one of them pulled up her Instagram on his phone. It was her, my Kathy. They went on about how she'd started teasing an OnlyFans account, posting links in her bio with captions like "for the real workouts." My blood was boiling. This wasn't just some fitness phase. She was using her newfound freedom to turn herself into a full-blown thirst trap for money. When I got home, I confronted her. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. "Kathy," I said, trying to keep my cool, "what the hell is this OnlyFans thing I'm hearing about?" She looked up, completely unfazed. "It's my body, Ben. My choice. And it's none of your business anymore." I couldn't believe her nerve. None of my business? We're still married, and you're out here selling yourself online while I'm trying to hold our lives together. She rolled her eyes, like I was some outdated fossil who just didn't get it. It's not selling myself. It's content creation. Plenty of people do it. Besides, it's not like you're paying my bills anymore. That's when it hit me. Kathy didn't just want a divorce. She wanted a whole new life. One where she was the star, the main character, and I was just some extra she had written off. She wasn't the least bit embarrassed or apologetic. If anything, she was proud. Like she had finally found her true calling as some kind of online spectacle. Over the next few weeks, her behavior escalated. She started dressing like she was auditioning for a reality show. Tight dresses, sky-high heels, and makeup piled on like frosting. Every time she walked out the door, she looked like she was heading to a red carpet event, not the grocery store. And the captions? They got worse. "Living my truth, no more holding back," and the one that really made me want to throw my phone. She's not a wife anymore. She's a force of nature. The audacity. While Kathy was out playing celebrity, I was left picking up the pieces, lawyers, paperwork, and all the mess she had left behind. But Kathy wasn't as untouchable as she thought. My lawyer, Steve, a true legend, had been doing some digging. Turns out, she'd been seeing a gold digger, someone with a gym membership. I think you can guess who I'm talking about. Stay tuned, folks. Things are about to get messy. Now, let's talk about the guy behind all this chaos, Roger, her personal trainer. Real original, right? The second I heard his name, I knew this wasn't just some innocent trainer-client relationship. Roger was the type of guy you'd expect to see on a reality dating show. Shredded, spray-tanned, and as deep as a puddle. He had all the charm, muscles, and smirks like he'd just walked out of a bad rom-com. Kathy wasn't subtle about their connection, either. One day, she strutted in after her workout, practically glowing. "Roger says I'm the strongest I've ever been," she bragged, not even looking at me. "Yeah, Kathy, I'm sure Roger also told you he's never trained anyone like you before. Because that's his script." A few weeks later, she stopped pretending it was just about workouts. She started casually dropping his name in conversations. "Roger's taking me to this new vegan restaurant," or "Roger said this protein powder is life-changing." Meanwhile, I'm standing there thinking, do I look like I care? But Kathy wasn't just name-dropping. She was flaunting him like he was her prize. Word spread quickly. Friends started texting me, reporting sightings of Kathy and Roger all over town, holding hands, laughing, and acting like the Instagram couple of the year. Kathy didn't even try to hide it. One night, she came home and, bold as ever, said, "Just so you know, Roger and I are dating now. I think it's time you accept that." Oh, I accepted it all right. I accepted that my wife had become a full-blown caricature of entitlement. She'd mentally checked out of our marriage long ago. So what did it matter to her if she added a public affair to her resume? The more I learned about Roger, the angrier I got. He wasn't just your typical gym bro. This guy had a history. My lawyer, Steve, who truly deserves a damn medal at this point, did some digging. Turns out, Roger had done this before, not once, but twice. He had a pattern. Find a married woman, shower her with compliments and validation, encourage her to leave her husband, and then, once the dust settled and the money stopped rolling in, he'd vanish like Houdini. Roger wasn't after love. He was running a hustle. He built these women up, made them feel invincible, and rode their wave until it wasn't convenient anymore. And Kathy? She was the perfect mark. She craved attention and validation like a fish craves water. Roger had her completely wrapped around his finger, and she couldn't even see it. The worst part? How smug he was about it. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Roger was already talking about their big plans. Apparently, he told someone. Once the divorce is finalized, Kathy and I are going to build an empire. An empire? Dude, you're a trainer, not a tech mogul. But sure, dream big. Roger wasn't just after Kathy's money. He was counting on mine too. Kathy was demanding half of my savings, spousal support, and even trying to take the house. She thought she could stroll into court, play the victim, and walk away with a golden ticket for her and Roger's new life. What she didn't know was that my lawyer had all the receipts, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Let me paint you a picture of Kathy and Roger as a couple. Picture a guy who owns nothing but tank tops, standing next to a woman suddenly convinced she's a Kardashian. They flooded social media with photos, posing in front of fancy cars that weren't theirs and tagging themselves at expensive restaurants, probably paid for by Kathy. They were trying so hard to scream, "Look at us, we're winning." But to anyone with half a brain, it was clear they were overcompensating. Their relationship wasn't without its cracks, though. Roger's over-the-top personality started clashing with Kathy's growing diva complex. One night, I overheard Kathy on the phone in the kitchen, arguing with someone. "I don't care what your exes said about you, Roger. You're with me now, and I deserve better than your baggage." I didn't catch the rest, but it was enough to tell me their little fantasy wasn't as perfect as they wanted everyone to think. As much as it infuriated me, there was something oddly satisfying about watching Kathy throw everything into Roger. She thought he was her ticket to a better life, but it was only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down, and I was making sure of that. After mediation, Kathy's confidence took a hit. She walked in there acting like Beyoncé and walked out looking like a deer in headlights. It was beautiful. Roger, her ever-loyal hype man, didn't even try to comfort her. He just sulked behind her, scrolling through his phone. That was my first clue that their little empire wasn't as solid as Kathy wanted everyone to believe. Let's rewind a bit. Mediation wasn't just a setback for Kathy. It was a complete disaster. She thought she'd stroll in, shed a few tears, and walk out with the house, half of my savings, and spousal support. Her lawyer painted this picture of her as the long-suffering wife who sacrificed everything for my so-called mediocre dreams. Mediocre dreams, by the way, that I had worked my ass off for, taking on a warehouse job for years. But Steve, my lawyer, was ready. He came armed with spreadsheets, screenshots, and even credit card statements to back me up. Kathy had been draining our joint account for months before filing for divorce. We're talking luxury spa days, designer clothes, $200 dinners, all while I was stuck eating leftovers and trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Steve made sure the court saw every penny she'd wasted. Then came the kicker, Roger's skeletons. His history of affairs, his pattern of sweet-talking married women, and how he always bailed when the money stopped flowing like he expected. The cherry on top? Steve found messages from one of Roger's exes, warning Kathy to be careful. Of course, Kathy didn't listen. She thought she was special. Roger's cocky smirk vanished during all this, and he looked downright uncomfortable, probably realizing his little scam was starting to unravel. Kathy tried to defend him, claiming Roger wasn't like that anymore, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. The judge wasn't buying their act. By the end of the session, it was clear Kathy wasn't going to walk away with the fortune she thought she'd get. Roger? He looked like he was already planning his exit strategy. After mediation, Kathy started acting off. She wasn't as smug anymore. She still tried to post her usual motivational nonsense on Instagram, but the captions were starting to get desperate. Instead of living my best life, it was things like, "Growth isn't always easy, but it's worth it." Yeah, sure, Kathy, keep telling yourself that. As for Roger, he was still around, but his presence started to fade. He wasn't as involved in Kathy's life as she made it seem. Roger started skipping their public appearances. No more hand-holding at fancy restaurants or couple goals gym pics. Word got around that he was already flirting with one of his other clients, some younger woman who apparently didn't come with Kathy's baggage. Classic move. One night, Kathy came home late. I was still living in the house with her at the time, because legally, I couldn't kick her out. She stumbled in, looking completely drained. I didn't say a word. I just stayed on the couch, watching her. She dropped her designer bag on the counter and sighed dramatically, clearly hoping I'd ask what was wrong. But I wasn't playing that game. I just went to my room. The next morning, Kathy tried to act like everything was fine. She was in the kitchen making one of her kale smoothies, but her usual smugness was gone. "Roger's been busy with his clients," she said out of nowhere. I didn't respond. I knew she wanted me to bite, to ask about him, but I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. A week later, the real drama began. I got a call from Steve. Apparently, Kathy had filed some last-minute paperwork, trying to claim more assets. She wanted emotional compensation for the stress I'd caused her during the marriage. Yes, you read that right. Kathy thought she could get more money by blaming me for her midlife crisis. The audacity. Steve, being the legend that he is, had already prepared for this nonsense. He filed a countersuit, showing how Kathy had drained our accounts and emotionally manipulated the situation for her own benefit. He even included her Instagram posts as evidence. The captions alone were gold, proof that she wasn't some stressed-out victim, but a self-absorbed diva living her best life at my expense. Around this time, Roger completely disappeared from the scene. He stopped showing up for their gym sessions, stopped answering her calls, and even blocked her on Instagram. Yes, he blocked Kathy. She was losing it, pacing around the house, calling him over and over. "Roger, call me back. We need to talk." She sounded desperate, and honestly, it was satisfying to witness. Eventually, one of her friends spilled the truth. Roger had moved on to another client. Someone younger, flashier, and most importantly, not tangled up in a messy divorce. Kathy was devastated. She tried to play it cool, posting cryptic quotes like, "Sometimes people aren't who they seem," and "You can't build an empire with someone who's playing games," but everyone saw through it. Her perfect man had bailed the second things got tough. This was when Kathy's entitlement really began to crack. She stopped going to the gym, swapped her glamorous outfits for sweats and messy buns, and even stopped posting on Instagram for a while. It was shocking. Like her entire identity had been tied to Roger and the fantasy of their new life. Without him, she had no idea who she was. One evening, she tried to talk to me. "Ben," she said, standing in the doorway of the living room, "I think we need to reevaluate everything. This divorce, it's been hard on both of us." I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline. "What are you getting at, Kathy?" I asked. She sighed dramatically, trying to play the victim. "I just think maybe we rushed into all of this. I mean, we had good times, didn't we?" I almost laughed. "Kathy, you filed for divorce. You told me I was holding you back, remember? Now that Roger's gone, you're having second thoughts? Unbelievable." She tried to play the sympathy card, talking about how lonely she was and how much she'd sacrificed for the marriage. But I wasn't buying it. "Kathy," I said, cutting her off, "you made your bed. Now lie in it." Kathy's little fantasy world was collapsing, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. Karma was handling everything for me. Let me walk you through how the courtroom drama unfolded, and why Kathy probably wishes she had never set foot in there. When court day finally arrived, Kathy didn't make her usual grand entrance. No designer blazer, no smug grin, just her and her lawyer, looking like two kids walking into detention. She must have known it wasn't going to go her way. The whole vibe was off, and honestly, I was enjoying every moment of it. On the other side, there I was with Steve, my lawyer, who came prepared with a binder so thick it could have doubled as a doorstop. By this point, I wasn't nervous. I had nothing left to lose. Kathy had already thrown every punch she had, and I was still standing. Today was all about making sure I didn't just survive this. I was going to win. Kathy's lawyer started by presenting her claim for emotional compensation. He painted Kathy as this long-suffering wife who'd been emotionally drained by my lack of support for her personal growth. Apparently, my refusal to support her fitness journey, which was really just her affair with Roger, was somehow considered neglect. Steve let Kathy's lawyer talk for a while, allowing him to dig his own hole. Then it was our turn. Steve methodically dismantled their case. He presented evidence showing that not only had I supported Kathy, but I had gone above and beyond during her so-called fitness journey. He showed proof that I'd taken over household chores, adjusted my work schedule, and even encouraged her to pursue her goals. Steve read aloud text messages where I offered to make her healthy meals, supported her gym sessions, and suggested we attend couples fitness classes to strengthen our bond. Then Steve dropped the bombshell. Kathy's emotional compensation claim wasn't just baseless. It was a blatant attempt to cover up her own emotional neglect. Steve presented emails and texts where Kathy openly mocked me to her friends, calling me boring and dead weight. He even had screenshots of her bragging about Roger, referring to me as her backup plan. But the real blow came when Steve tackled the financial side of Kathy's claim. He presented our bank statements, showing how Kathy had siphoned thousands of dollars from our joint account to fuel her luxury lifestyle. Kathy's lawyer tried to argue back, but Steve wasn't finished. He unveiled the ultimate piece of evidence, a journal entry from Kathy that Steve had subpoenaed. In it, Kathy had outlined her plan to leave me, drain as much as she could from the marriage, and use the settlement money to start fresh with Roger. The judge's face when he read that was pure disbelief. The courtroom fell silent as the judge flipped through the paperwork, his stern expression growing more intense with each page. Kathy sat beside her lawyer, visibly tense, her polished nails nervously tapping on the table. Her confidence, which she'd flaunted so boldly during mediation, had completely evaporated. On the other side, I sat with Steve, feeling a mix of anticipation and satisfaction. This was it. The moment everything Kathy had worked so hard to spin into her narrative would fall apart. The judge addressed Kathy's emotional compensation claim first. "Mrs. Patterson," he began, his voice calm but firm, "your request for emotional compensation lacks any substantive evidence." He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "While emotional distress is a valid consideration in some cases, this court requires clear and demonstrable proof. Your claims are based on subjective feelings, not facts." Then he turned his attention to Steve's counterarguments. He recounted the text messages, bank statements, and Instagram posts that painted a starkly different picture from the one Kathy and her lawyer had tried to present. "Mr. Patterson," the judge said, addressing me for the first time, "you've demonstrated a clear and consistent pattern of support for your wife throughout the marriage. The evidence provided shows no indication of emotional neglect. In fact, it suggests the opposite. You went above and beyond to accommodate her needs and aspirations." Kathy's lawyer tried to interject, stumbling over an objection that the evidence had been taken out of context, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "The context is clear, counselor. Let's move on." Next, the judge turned to the financial aspect of the case, carefully reviewing the evidence Steve had presented. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, his tone growing colder, "you withdrew over $223,000 from your joint accounts in the period leading up to this divorce filing. These funds were not used for household expenses or shared needs. Instead, they were spent on luxury items, high-end dining, and personal indulgences. The court finds this behavior irresponsible and in direct violation of your marital financial obligations." Kathy shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face turning a deep red. Her lawyer tried to downplay the spending, claiming it was part of her coping mechanism during a difficult time, but the judge was not swayed. "Coping mechanisms do not justify financial recklessness," he said sharply. Then came the house. Kathy had confidently argued that she was entitled to half of it, claiming she had contributed emotionally, if not financially, to its upkeep. Steve was ready. He provided records showing that I had paid the mortgage in full, maintained the property, and handled renovations, all while Kathy had contributed nothing. The judge didn't hesitate. "The house will remain the property of Mr. Patterson," he declared. "Mrs. Patterson, you have no financial claim to it based on the evidence presented." Kathy's jaw dropped. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she waved him off, too stunned to respond. The judge wasn't finished yet. Furthermore, the judge continued, "Due to the unauthorized use of marital funds, Mrs. Patterson is ordered to reimburse Mr. Patterson in the amount of $23,750. The courtroom fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Kathy's lawyer slumped in his chair, clearly defeated, while Kathy looked as though the wind had been knocked out of her. Her meticulously crafted narrative had unraveled in front of everyone, leaving her with nothing but the fallout from her own actions. The ruling was final. No appeals, no loopholes. The judge closed his folder and said, "This court is adjourned." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. As I left the courtroom, the tension in the air was thick. Kathy's lawyer was already packing up his briefcase, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Kathy trailed behind him, her head low. For someone who had entered this process with the swagger of a reality TV star, she now looked completely defeated. Steve patted me on the back as we walked out. "We did it," he said, offering a small smile. I nodded, grateful for his work. He had not only defended me but had also exposed the truth behind Kathy's manipulative tactics. As I exited the courthouse, I couldn't resist glancing back at Kathy. She was still standing there, staring blankly at the floor. For a brief moment, I felt a flash of pity, but it quickly faded. She had masterminded this chaos, and now she was facing the consequences. In the days that followed, the fallout from the ruling became impossible to ignore. Kathy was ordered to vacate the house within 30 days, and I made sure to hold her to it. She tried to stall, claiming she needed more time to get her affairs in order, but I wasn't having it. I reminded her that she had plenty of time to prepare while she was busy flaunting her affair with Roger. Grudgingly, she packed up her things and moved out. Watching her leave that final day was surprisingly satisfying. She loaded her designer luggage into an old car that one of her friends had apparently lent her and drove off without so much as a goodbye. The house, once filled with tension and resentment, suddenly felt peaceful. Kathy's financial situation took a sharp dive. Without access to my income or the marital funds she'd been draining, she was forced to fend for herself. She tried selling off some of her designer clothes and handbags, but it wasn't nearly enough to cover the debt she owed me. Word spread quickly that she was borrowing money from friends, but they were growing tired of her sob stories. As for Roger, he completely disappeared. He didn't return any of her calls or messages. About 2 weeks after the ruling, Kathy showed up at the house, unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, her flawless appearance now replaced with messy hair and tired eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Ben," she said softly, her voice cracking. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Kathy?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I made mistakes, big ones. I let Roger manipulate me. I got caught up in this fantasy and I ruined everything." Her words seemed rehearsed, but the desperation in her eyes was real. She wasn't here because of genuine remorse. She was here because she had nowhere else to turn. "I don't know what you expect me to say," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "You made your choices. You chose Roger. You chose to try and take everything from me, and now you're dealing with the fallout." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I just can't. Can we at least be civil? Maybe start over?" "I have nothing, Ben. I'm lost." I stared at her for a moment, feeling nothing but resolve. "Kathy, I gave you everything. My support, my trust, my love, and you threw it all away. You don't get to come back now and ask for a second chance. That's not how this works." She broke down sobbing on my porch, but I didn't flinch. After a moment, I stepped back inside and closed the door, leaving her outside with her regrets. Since that day, I've moved on. It's strange how life can twist in ways you never see coming. After everything with Kathy, I honestly thought she would fade into obscurity, a casualty of her own poor choices. But as I sat at home one evening scrolling through social media, something caught my eye that I couldn't ignore. It was a headline, bold and brash: "Kathy Patterson, from heartbreak to latest internet sensation." My first instinct was to ignore it. Maybe it was some clickbait, a name used to get attention. But curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked the link. What I saw stunned me. Kathy, now fully reinvented, had become an adult movie star. And not just any star. She was one of the biggest names in the industry, her face plastered on websites and magazine covers. Her transformation was something I never could have predicted, but a closer look at the images I made out that the boobs are fake. The woman I once knew, who used to be so obsessed with status and appearances, was now flaunting it all in the most public way possible. Kathy had always been beautiful, yes, but the way she carried herself back then was a far cry from the confident, unapologetic persona I saw on screen now. She looked like someone who had completely embraced the role of being the center of attention, the star, the one in control. But the real shocker wasn't her new career. No, the real surprise was the fact that Roger was back in her life. And he wasn't just some shadow lurking in the background. He was her manager. Roger, the guy who had once been nothing more than an affair partner, had somehow worked his way into a position of power, handling her contracts and making her the face of a rising empire. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The man who had wrecked my life, who had stolen Kathy from me, was now cashing in on her success. It seemed like some sick joke, but this was no punchline. Kathy had found a new path, one that led her to fame, wealth, and it seemed an odd sense of fulfillment. It's funny how the universe has a way of balancing things out, though. Roger had finally gotten what he wanted all those years ago. He had Kathy, but in a way that neither of them could have anticipated. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had once manipulated her into betraying me, and now he was managing her as she put herself out there for everyone to see. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't feeling a bit of a sting. Seeing Kathy thrive in a way I never thought possible, especially with Roger by her side, was hard to digest. But then I reminded myself of everything that had happened. She made her bed, and now she was lying in it, literally and figuratively. She'd chosen this path, just like she had chosen to tear apart our lives. For a moment, I found myself scrolling through her OnlyFans page. It was one of those fleeting, stupid decisions. She was selling more than just her body. She was selling herself, her identity, her entire existence as a commodity. It was hard to see the woman I once loved in that light, but it was clear she had no shame in it anymore. And Roger, seeing him there, helping her build this new life, it made me feel like I was reliving that nightmare all over again. But in the end, I had to remind myself of who I was now. The person Kathy and Roger had made me into, the person I'd had to become to survive the wreckage of what they had caused. I'd moved on. I had my own life now, and I wasn't about to let their twisted little story drag me back into it. Kathy might be famous now, but it didn't matter to me. Her choices no longer had any power over me. Still, the fact that she was out there, flaunting her success with Roger at her side, felt like one last slap in the face from a past I was still trying to leave behind. But I was stronger now. I knew what I had to do to keep moving forward, no matter how bizarre and unsettling their success had become. They had their fame, their money, and their little empire. Me? I had my peace of mind, and that was worth more than any fame or fortune they could ever have. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.